Strange things always happen on rainy nights. A young boy was chased by several men in black. Just as they were about to catch him, he vanished and suddenly reappeared in front of a car. The driver couldn't stop in time and hit him. Shocked, the driver froze. The location was isolated with no villages or stores nearby. At that moment, all the street and traffic lights seemed to be malfunctioning, flickering continuously. The driver quickly looked in the rear-view mirror and saw a mysterious blue flame on the ground. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief. When he looked again, the blue flame had disappeared. A boy lay motionless on the ground, his backpack emitting a strange blue light. The man rushed him to the hospital, but despite the doctor's efforts, the boy's heart stopped. The doctor regretfully announced the time of death. The man wept with guilt. Then, miraculously, the boy's heartbeat returned. He was revived fully. Later, the man, named Yuk Dong-ju, a university graduate and struggling writer with debts, was taken to the police station for questioning. The previous day, a friend had stolen his credit card and taken out a loan of $3 million. Even his landlord pitied him. To repay the credit card debt, he had taken a job as a courier. Besides a deceitful friend, he also had a troublemaking mother who had caused car accidents and fallen for scams, losing their house. Dong-ju felt overwhelmed by midlife crises. Tonight, he almost killed a boy who fell from the sky. Questioned by Officer Hyun-soo, Dong-ju described the eerie incident, but it sounded unbelievable. Hyun-soo comforted him, remarking on the miracle of the boy's revival. Returning home, Dong-ju found the boy's black backpack in his car. Curious, he opened it to find vintage items including a Rubik's Cube, a tape deck, floppy disks, a scenic photo, a mysterious black stone, and a thick novel manuscript titled God is Dead. Intrigued, Dong-ju read the manuscript, captivated by its text and plot. Unable to find any information about the novel online, he concluded it was unpublished. The next morning, a police friend visited Dong-ju for breakfast and, assuming Dong-ju was the author, praised the manuscript, suggesting it could qualify for the Daehan Literary Award. However, Dong-ju was preoccupied with arranging his mother's $15 million compensation. His friend casually suggested asking for help from the second son of Taegang Group. Reluctant, Dong-ju found himself in Lee Myung-seok's office. Lee, now running a successful publishing house and a university classmate, teased Dong-ju about his misfortunes. But Dong-ju, needing a loan, had to feign politeness. After learning of Dong-ju's visit and his request for a loan, Lee Myung-seok laughed and said that lending money was possible, but asked when he planned to repay it. Dong-ju confidently replied that he would repay the principal with interest immediately after being nominated for the Daehan Literary Prize. Lee Myung-seok sarcastically suggested that Dong-ju might as well wait until he won the lottery, as the odds would probably be higher. Dong-ju, whose self-esteem was severely hurt, impulsively took out the novel manuscript and threw it in front of Lee Myung-seok. Initially, Dong-ju had planned to return the young boy's backpack to the police after borrowing the money, but a conversation with an old friend made him rethink. He had copied the entire manuscript. Lee Myung-seok, looking disdainful, pushed the manuscript away with his foot and told Dong-ju to leave his house. Dong-ju left angrily and later went to the hospital with Officer Hyun-soo after receiving a notification that the boy was found in the next room holding the hand of a comatose elderly woman, as if sensing something. The doctors arrived in surprise to find the boy, who had just survived a car accident, standing there. The boy turned to the doctors, said he had something to tell Seon-ae, and then collapsed. The next day, Officer Hyun-soo and Dong-ju were called to the hospital where the doctor recounted the previous night's events, stating she had never seen such a patient and that the boy had fallen back into a coma with no prediction for when he might wake up. As Hyun-soo was telling Dong-ju that they couldn't find any clues to the boy's identity and were looking for any personal belongings, she was interrupted by a phone call. Dong-ju went to visit the boy in his room and received a call from Lee Myung-seok at the publishing house, offering him a contract to publish his work. As a writer who had been unnoticed for 7 years, Lee Myung-seok's offer was a tempting opportunity. Torn between ethics and a chance to turn his life around, Dong-ju hesitated. Lee Myung-suk then added that he could pay a deposit the next day. Looking back at the unconscious boy, reality overcame Dongju's conscience. 2 months later, the mystery novel God is Dead became a sensational hit. Promotional posters were everywhere, and the book was prominently displayed in bookstores. Dongju became a celebrated novelist overnight, debt-free, driving a luxury car, and living in a high-end apartment. Even his once despised mother benefited, shopping in upscale stores. Friends and family were proud of him, but Dongju knew the success was undeserved, as it was based on a stolen novel, and feared it could collapse overnight. Unexpectedly, the boy woke up after more than 2 months. After talking with him, the doctors discovered he remembered nothing about his past, not even his own name or where he was going. The boy mentioned experiencing hallucinations and visions, but could not describe them in detail. The doctor comforted him, saying all his tests were normal, and it was likely a temporary reaction after the accident. He advised the boy to eat well and sleep well, assuring him that he would recover soon. With encouragement, he squeezed the boy's shoulder. Suddenly, the boy had a flash of bizarre images about the doctor in his mind, realizing he could foresee others' futures. After the doctor left, the boy wanted to get some fresh air. However, as he approached the door, he heard various voices again, as if all the hospital's patients were pleading with him for help. Overwhelmed with pain, Dongju soon received a call from the hospital informing him that the boy he had hit had woken up. Dongju was in a panic, and after mentally preparing himself, he arrived at the hospital feeling ashamed and timid. He reached the boy's room, where the boy was still tormented by the voices entering his ears, diving under the covers to mute them. Just as Dongju knocked and entered, the boy under the covers vanished right before his eyes. The next second, the boy appeared at the door of the next room, pushing it open and walking straight in. This room was occupied by the comatose elderly woman the boy had seen just before his coma 2 months earlier. The elderly woman's daughter, startled by the sudden appearance of the boy, was shocked when he called her Seon-ai and told her he had a message from her grandmother. As Seon-ai was about to inquire further, a menacing middle-aged man entered, claiming to be the old lady's son. Sensing his malice, the boy glared at the man, his eyes turning blue. Outside, Dongju, startled by this, curiously entered the adjacent room. The boy's gaze softened, and he relayed that the grandmother was about to pass away and had some last words for her daughter. As if truly hearing her mother's voice, Seon-ai held her mother's hand and cried, releasing years of grievances. The grandmother expressed regret for having favored sons over daughters, and apologized for not treating her daughter as well as her brothers. She disclosed the location of her savings, urging her daughter to use it for knee surgery and to buy some nice clothes, and advised her to sever ties with the reckless brother. After delivering these messages, the boy walked out and slowly returned to his own room, with a puzzled Dongju following behind. Inside, the boy finally noticed Dongju, who had just witnessed the boy's sudden teleportation, strange conversations, and ability to hit someone from a distance. Dongju forgot to introduce himself until the boy asked who he was. Dongju hurriedly explained that he was the driver in the traffic accident and sincerely apologized. Surprisingly, the boy held no grudge and grasped his hand, confusing Dongju further. Meanwhile, many medical staff rushed past towards the elderly lady's room. Dongju followed to check, and indeed the elderly lady had passed away. Was what the boy said really her last words? Elsewhere, the police received a report that a car had been dredged from a river by a sanitation team. Officer Hyun-soo also arrived at the scene, but her colleague Kang Jae-soo's gaze was not friendly. A body was found in the car, identified as the famous director Shin Kyung-chul, who had been involved in a sexual harassment scandal and had disappeared 2 months prior. Among the physical evidence at the scene, Hyun-soo found a plastic bottle containing a USB drive and a strangely shaped piece of wood, which seemed familiar to her. After returning to the police station, Hyun-soo was assigned to work with his colleague Byung-man to investigate the itinerary on the day Shin Kyung-chul disappeared. A mysterious person was browsing Dongju's novel, examining the scars on his hands. This person was the real culprit behind Shin Kyung-chul's lake plunge incident. 2 months ago, this mysterious individual took Shin Kyung-chul, who was tightly bound, to the riverside. Upon removing his mask to face Shin Kyung-chul, The man seemed to see something terrifying and became panic-stricken. The mysterious person then stuffed a plastic bottle into Shin Kyung-chol's mouth, set the car on autopilot, and coldly watched from the shore. When he removed his gloves, 2 round scars were visible on the back of his hand. A father, pushing his daughter out of a supermarket, looked lovingly at his adorable daughter. Suddenly, the girl pointed behind her father. Following her direction, he saw a man urinating in public, seemingly unconcerned about others. The father sensed the man's malevolent gaze, explained the situation to his daughter with a smile, and pushed her towards their car. Suddenly, the man approached them holding a knife and walked straight toward the father and daughter. When the man lunged with the knife, the father shielded his daughter tightly as the assailant. When his wife arrived, the assailant had already fled. A well-intended warning resulted in her husband lying in a pool of blood. The woman, a neurosurgeon, buried the pain of that day deep inside her heart for years, treating all her patients with gentleness and responsibility until one day she felt suffocated while resting at the hospital entrance. The person being wheeled from an ambulance was the murderer of her husband. The sudden appearance of her enemy filled her with memories of anger and hatred. Wondering why the murderer was still alive and well, she composed herself and inquired about the assailant's condition from a nurse. Standing at the door of the murderer's hospital room, she coldly watched the sleeping man inside. Convinced that the agony of prison had not brought the devil to repentance, she decided to take matters into her own hands. That night, taking advantage of the duty officer's bathroom break, she entered the murderer's room with a lethal injection. As she injected the substance into the IV line, the sleeping enemy woke up and stared at her in horror. Suddenly, time seemed to stop. A young boy appeared in the room out of nowhere, and everything around seemed to pause. This supernatural boy had been hospitalized due to a car accident 2 months earlier. The doctor had formed some connection with the boy during his examination. He could feel her immense pain. Just as the doctor saw the murderer, the boy in the room also truly felt her anger and hatred. The perpetrator who had come to visit him saw the boy's sudden pain and hurried out to find the doctor. However, within just 10 seconds, the boy had mysteriously disappeared. Seeing her enemy, the doctor vomited from immense grief and cried uncontrollably. Meanwhile, the boy also appeared in the hospital yard, exhibiting the same physical reactions as the doctor. This scene was coincidentally witnessed by Dong-ju, who had been searching for him. The boy's strange behavior was beyond Dong-ju's understanding. He told Dong-ju about the events of this period, how he could always hear various screams and cries, and could feel the immense pain of those he touched, like the elderly woman in a vegetative state who died yesterday. He heard her urgent plea and conveyed her last words to her daughter. Although Dong-ju had difficulty believing this fantastical story, considering the bizarre scenes he had witnessed over the days, he decided to temporarily accept the unbelievable notion that the boy had supernatural abilities. Fortunately, the young man could not read Dong-ju's mind. Otherwise, his act of claiming the novel as his own would have been exposed. To understand what had happened, the young man visited the doctor's office. When he touched the doctor's scarf, he foresaw that the doctor intended to kill someone and then commit suicide. He had to prevent the tragedy from happening. The young man immediately removed the needle from the criminal's hand and then grabbed both the criminal's and the doctor's hands. A blue smoke swirled around them, and at that moment, he finally understood that the criminal in front of him was the murderer of her husband. Scenes of the past tragedy replayed in the young man's mind, and tears streamed down his face. The young man roared in anger and transferred all the doctor's painful memories and feelings to the criminal using his powers. Everything around them returned to normal. The man kept begging for mercy and screaming for help. Hearing the noise, the duty officer rushed over. The doctor, unflinching, said she came to check upon hearing the noise and quickly put away the IV bottle with medication. Taking advantage of the chaos, she led the young man out of the ward. In the hallway, the doctor said she could clearly feel her pain transferred to the murderer. The young man told her that he had acquired strange powers after a car accident, which allowed him to feel her despair upon touching her. However, he did not want the doctor to end up taking a drastic step. Living with the victim's pain was a better punishment for the murderer than death. The doctor found the young man's abilities incredible, but was not afraid. Instead, she felt immensely relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from her heart. When the murderer was discharged, he was mentally broken by guilt. The doctor's eyes, once filled with hatred, were clear as she could finally let go of the past and start a new life. After this incident, the young man became even more curious about his own identity. He approached Dongju to inquire about the whereabouts of his backpack. However, Dongju could not produce it because someone had broken into his apartment the previous night and stolen the backpack. The thief, identified by a circular scar on his arm, was the actual culprit in the Sinkyung-chul Lake drowning case. Interestingly, he took the backpack but left behind the novel manuscript, choosing to leave a message. Which side? Light or darkness? Signed Kai. Dongju became nervous, as it was clear that the thief knew his secret. What Dongju did not realize was that the backpack might have put him in danger. This is the so-called heaven on earth in Korea, the Fool Coffee House, which operates on a membership basis, with power, wealth, and status as the criteria. It serves only the so-called elite, providing members with one-on-one personal services. They relax there, drinking and playing cards. However, this utopia for the elite welcomed two uninvited guests today. Police officers Hyun-soo and Byung-man, greeted by the composed Madam Kang Hye-kyung, who seemed to have anticipated the police's arrival. A few days ago, the famous director Shin Kyung-chul was found dead in the river, 2 months post-mortem. The police quickly began their investigation, finding a USB drive at the scene containing videos of Shin Kyung-chul assaulting female actresses. Kang Jae-soo suggested starting the investigation with these victims since the murderer left evidence of the crime. However, Officer Hyun-soo disagreed, noting similarities between this case and the unsolved murder of Jeon Do-hyun 2 years prior. The murderer was likely the same person, as both victims were infamous before their deaths, and evidence proving their crimes was found in their mouths, along with a uniquely shaped wooden piece. Hyun-soo took out a newspaper found in Jeon Do-hyun's pocket 2 years ago, likely left intentionally by the murderer. The photo, taken 10 years ago, shows 4 influential individuals: Tai Man, second-generation chairman of Taejiang Group; Choi Jong-nam, a third-generation prosecutor; Shin Kyung-chul, a recently murdered famous director; and Na Sang-woo, the missing heir of an academic conglomerate for 7 years. Investigations revealed that aside from the missing Na Sang-woo, the others were the last to meet Shin Kyung-chul before his demise at Full Cafe, where they gathered that night. The cafe's owner, Kang Hye-kyung, a longtime friend of the four, informed the police that Shin Kyung-chul was distressed over a sexual assault scandal. After the others left, he stayed, drank heavily, and eventually called a designated driver himself. Kang Hye-kyung remained composed when Hyun-soo asked if she found anything suspicious or felt uneasy about one friend missing and another murdered, to which she replied with a smile, "Shouldn't you be investigating that?" Meanwhile, Tae-man, chairman of Taejiang Group, had noticed Dongju's novel, and realizing his son's company was publishing it, began investigating Dongju. Now, it seems everything is connected through this novel. Back from the hospital, Dongju, exhausted, lay on the sofa when a call from the killer, who had stolen his backpack, came in. The caller praised the novel's revision, but disagreed with the ending, stating he would conclude it in his own way. Dongju, feeling the discomfort of being compromised, requested a meeting, but the man said they would meet when the time was right before hanging up. On a windy street, a thinly dressed young boy shivered by the roadside, watched intently by a boy in a car, unseen by writer Dongju. When Dongju found it odd, the boy in the car chased after the young one, who seemed to be leading him somewhere. Dongju parked and followed, finding the boy staring at a graffiti wall, with no sign of the young boy. Touching the graffiti, Dongju was mystified as the boy appeared in a cluttered room with the young boy, battered and barely alive. This must have been a call for help from the boy's consciousness. The boy tried to take him to a hospital, but found the door and windows securely locked. It was like a prison. Suddenly remembering fragments of his own past, locked in a similar situation with another child, both marked with whip scars, he realized he had a brother. Another touch, triggering his special ability, revealed the young boy's abuse by his own mother. Locked in a small, dark room, dressed inadequately, fed cookies weekly, and often beaten. Knowing the truth, the boy's eyes turned blue, a sign of extreme anger and hatred. And mysteriously, the locked door opened effortlessly. Just as the boy's mother returned home, she was terrified by the blue-eyed stranger before her. She was then thrown by an invisible force. Suddenly, her hands uncontrollably strangled her own neck. As she nearly suffocated, she continuously begged for mercy. The boy seemed like a completely different person. Outside, Dongju's call brought the boy back to his senses. Earlier, Dongju had been anxiously pacing in the alley, examining the graffiti the boy had touched. He noticed a red mailbox drawn next to a house. He immediately started searching the alley, eventually finding the house with the red mailbox. Freed from the mysterious power, the boy's mother collapsed on the ground. The boy quickly picked up the child and ran out, taking him to the hospital with Dongju. Before leaving, the boy locked the malicious mother in the room, a taste of her own medicine. Fortunately, they reached the hospital in time, and the boy was out of immediate danger. The abusive mother was arrested by the police. She now faces a prison full of iron bars. Escaping his mother's clutches, the boy finally showed a happy smile. The doctor told Dongju the boy had many old scars, likely from past abuse. Dongju was even more sympathetic, deciding to care for him until his family was found. Meanwhile, police officers Hyun-soo and Byung-man returned to the Seoul cafe. They learned that the person who drove Shin Kyung-chul away that night was not the usual chauffeur. To Kang Hee-kyung's surprise, the security guard admitted the mix-up, thinking it was just a mistake by the chauffeur service. The guard hadn't seen the driver's face clearly due to a mask. Back at the station, Hyun-soo suspected an accomplice in the cafe knew the exact time Shin Kyung-chul called for a chauffeur. She decided to investigate the suspicious guard. Later, Hyun-soo visited the hospital, where she had once investigated the boy's car accident. Some questions still needed clarification. Learning that the boy hadn't regained his memory, she gave him her card to contact her once he was better. However, as the boy took the card, terrifying images flashed through his mind, reflecting Hyun-soo's deepest pain and despair. The boy cried in empathy, and Hyun-soo, reminded of her past, wept. Fortunately, Dongju arrived, saw the boy exhaling white smoke, knew he was using his powers again, and quickly dismissed Hyun-soo, claiming it was an after effect of the accident. That night at home, Dongju's friend showed him a video from the peephole camera. The intruder was unknown to Dongju. Urged by his friend to call the police, Dongju hesitated, fearing exposure of his plagiarism. He brushed it off as possibly an obsessed fan who had called him unhappy with a story ending. The next day, Officer Hyun-soo visited Dongju, asking why he sent her a book. Confused, Dongju denied sending anything, but her follow-up shocked him. A murder in his novel had happened in reality. Meanwhile, heirs of a Korean conglomerate were brutally beating a homeless man, even recording the assault. As the man barely clung to life, the youths dragged him to the river to continue their attack. A passing couple witnessed the scene, and the young man attempted to intervene but was quickly overwhelmed. The assailants, gleeful for the camera, killed the homeless man with a rock as he struggled to stand. Hell is empty, and all the devils are here. This is a murder case involving a homeless man that occurred 27 years ago. The case was hastily closed when someone confessed. The perpetrator's wealthy heirs are now prominent figures. Officer Hyun-soo confronted the author, Dongju, questioning how his novel matches the unsolved case, including details only the killer and police would know. Dongju, unaware of the actual murders, couldn't explain how these details entered his story, as he had stolen the manuscript that launched his fame. Revealing the truth would destroy his achievements, so he feigned anger to mask his anxiety. Despite sensing Dongju's panic, Hyun-soo left without evidence, taking a bottle of water, which was actually to obtain Dongju's fingerprints. Afterwards, Dongju researched the 27-year-old case and a recent murder of Shin Kyung-chul, finding nothing substantial. Suddenly, he remembered a landscape photo in the novel's manuscript, possibly of the crime scene riverbank. Rushing there with the photo, he compared scenes, suspecting a connection to a superpowered boy he once hit. He then contacted his police friend, falsely seeking inspiration, to access internal investigation files of the cases. On his way back, Dongju felt uneasy, considering the complexity beyond his imagination. He almost confessed everything to Officer Hyun-soo, but a call from Lee Myung-seok changed his mind. announcing a 10th reprint of his novel and a significant advance, adding 500 million won to his account. The sudden wealth pushed his guilt and anxiety aside. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo accessed the old homeless man's case files, noticing many unresolved issues. The original case officers were Byung-man and now Congressman Byun Jong-il, currently meeting after many years. Byung-man asked Byun Jong-il why the last call of Jeon Do-hyun, killed 2 years ago, was to him. Originally, Byung-man couldn't find witnesses due to a leg injury and his child's severe illness, leaving the case to his partner, Byun Jong-il, who quickly found both a witness and the killer. The witness, Jeon Do-hyun, was found hanged 2 years ago. Byun Jong-il's ambiguous answers during their meeting clarified his suspicions. Afterwards, Byung-man visited Shinkyung-chul's high school, spotting a familiar face in the graduation photos, Lee Ha-na, a boy who had tried to stop the wealthy heirs from beating the homeless man. Lee Ha-na had approached Byung-man as a witness, but fled upon seeing Byun Jong-il and never reappeared. The principal informed Byung-man that Lee Ha-na had also been missing for years. In the evening, Hyun-soo found Byung-man and questioned him about why he hid the fact that Jeon Do-hyun was the eyewitness to the homeless man's case 27 years ago, noting the obvious flaws in the case and questioning if the real culprit was actually caught. Byung-man admitted his doubts about the case, but explained that he remained silent out of gratitude to Byun Jong-il, who had helped him during a difficult time in his life. Disappointed, Hyun-soo continued to inquire about the student Lee Ha-na, surprising Byung-man, who asked how Hyun-soo knew about him. Unable to reveal she guessed from a novel, Hyun-soo kept silent. The super-powered boy, Lee Kang-san, had traveled from 1995 and met his first love from his student days. Despite losing his memory in an accident, one look brought a familiar feeling. He immediately returned to find the woman, hoping she could tell him about his identity. The woman, moved to tears by his resemblance to her first love, denied knowing him. Seeing his disappointment, she handed him her business card, suggesting he contact her if he wished. When Lee Kang-san took the card, he was surprised to find that, like Dong-ju, he could not sense her past or thoughts. After they parted, the woman remained, lost in memories, never expecting the boy was indeed her first love from school. After Lee Kang-san's checkup, Dong-ju picked him up from the hospital, agreeing to take care of him until he regained his memory or found his family. Knowing Lee Kang-san's ability to sense others' pain and his tendency to meddle, Dong-ju repeatedly warned him not to get involved in anything he heard or saw. Lee Kang-san agreed, but immediately ignored this advice. Leaving the hospital, Dong-ju took Lee Kang-san to buy the latest smartphone, which delighted him. When Dong-ju realized he left something in the store and returned to retrieve it, Lee Kang-san disappeared. No one answered his new phone, and while Dong-ju searched frantically, he received a call from the police station. Just then, Lee Kang-san, playing happily with his new phone, was bumped by a girl passing by. The touch made him sense her suicidal thoughts, and he quickly followed her into a bookstore. The girl, feeling followed, hurried out and ran to a police station, claiming a stalker was after her. At the station, when asked why he followed her, Lee Kang-san looked at the girl and shocked the police by telepathically trying to prevent her suicide. The bewildered police wondered if the girl was delusional. Lee Kang-san continued to telepathically reassure her that failing once isn't a reason to die, urging her to live well for herself. Confused, the police asked if they were feeling unwell, as one was silent and the other spoke non-stop. Suddenly, the girl claimed Lee Kang-san was her friend and they were just joking, then quickly left the station without looking back. Dong-ju also happened to come to the police station to pick up Lee Kang-san. Since there was no victim, Lee Kang-san was naturally released. Just a short distance away, the girl suddenly realized that the young man hadn't actually spoken to her verbally. She turned around and ran back to find Lee Kang-san. The girl exchanged phone numbers with Lee Kang-san, promising to message him. She playfully threatened to expose his supernatural abilities if he read her messages but didn't reply, then shyly ran away. Confused, Lee Kang-san asked Dong-ju what the girl meant by her words. The next day, Dong-ju received a call from an old friend who was a police officer. He mentioned that their high school principal was very familiar with the homeless man's murder case from 27 years ago and was inviting him to speak. This provided an opportunity for Dong-ju to inquire further. At the school, while waiting in the principal's office, Dongju stumbled upon a photo from 1995. The shock sent a chill through him as he recognized the student on the far left as the young man he had accidentally hit with his car. Could this boy with superpowers be from 1995? Moreover, his hairstyle and shoes matched exactly those in the photo. Dongju quickly asked the principal about this person, learning that the boy in the photo was originally named Lee Kang-san. He and his brother Lee Ha-na were orphans who grew up in a church-run orphanage. His brother, a student at the prestigious Taikang High School, was known as a prodigious young man with excellent grades and a talent for writing. Tragically, Lee Ha-na mysteriously disappeared in 1995. Despite Kang-san reporting his brother's disappearance to the police, they dismissed it as a voluntary runaway. Soon after, Kang-san also vanished. The principal informed Dongju that Lee Kang-san's best friend from those days was teaching at the school and could provide more insights. From this friend, Dongju learned that Lee Kang-san had many old scars on his back. All clues now linked together explained the young man's sudden appearance on a stormy night, his resurrection, possession of various superpowers, fascination with modern objects, and preference for 90s music. Dongju now concluded that the boy living in his house was indeed Lee Kang-san from 1995. Recalling police officer Hyun-soo's mention of a plagiarized novel at his house, Dongju wondered if it might actually be Kang-san's murder diary. He then speculated whether the person who claimed to be Kai and took the backpack was Kang-san's brother, Lee Ha-na. Meanwhile, as Kang-san was staying at Dongju's house, he picked up a family photo to look at when a strange memory surfaced. In the memory, the glasses-wearing uncle, Dongju's father, handed him the black backpack, instructing him not to return to the orphanage and trust no one. These fragmented memories caused Kang-san intense headaches and emotional turmoil. Unleashing a massive energy that wreaked havoc in the house. Just then, police officer Hyun-soo arrived at Dongju's house to inquire about the novel. Hearing screams and crashes, she was about to call for help when the door unexpectedly opened. Entering, she found only Kang-san, who explained that he had caused the mess alone. Hyun-soo was skeptical. Frustrated, Kang-san revealed his supernatural abilities and claimed he had met Dongju's father. To Hyun-soo, this seemed unbelievable as she knew Dongju's father had died in a car accident 27 years ago, long before Kang-san could have met him. She attributed his claims to memory confusion caused by post-traumatic stress. Yet, Kang-san insisted that the black backpack he had at the time of his accident was given to him by Dongju's father, which Dongju had since lost. Hyun-soo only then learned that Dongju had initially hidden the matter about the backpack. At this moment, Hyun-soo no longer dwells on whether what Kang-san said was true. While the teenager was tidying the house, she secretly took the storage card from the surveillance system and also snapped a photo of the message signed K.I. on the novel manuscript. After gathering the evidence, Hyun-soo left Dongju's house on the pretext of having something urgent to attend to and went back to the police station. There, Hyun-soo informed Byung-man that the 27-year-old homeless man case, as well as the recent murders of Jeon Do-hyun and Shin Kyung-chul, matched the cases described in the novel God is Dead. However, the truth about the homeless man case in the novel was far from reality. The real culprits in the novel were 4 influential second-generation rich kids, and from the narrative perspective, it seemed to reflect the actual witness account of Lee Ha-na from years ago. Given the current leads, the missing Lee Ha-na might still be alive and seeking revenge. As a child, the novel's author, Yuk Dong-ju, lived in the same neighborhood as Lee Ha-na and knew too much about the murders not to be connected to her. If the serial killer really was Lee Ha-na, Byung-man would deeply regret his past actions. Lee Ha-na once approached Byung-man regarding the homeless man's murder, but he was preoccupied with family matters at the time and handed her over to the then police officer Byung Jong-il. Byung-man, now carrying Lee Ha-na's photo, confronted Byung Jong-il, now a congressman, about what the young man had told him back then. However, Byung Jong-il dismissively claimed not to remember the child. Despite this, Byung-man had lost all respect for his once close colleague who had clearly done many dirty deeds for his career.